Name of God, the compassionate and merciful. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new episode of the Fact series, in which we discuss international political matters every week. This is Foad Mahdavi, and in this episode, I have the honor of being the host of Manuel Ochsenreiter, journalist and political analyst from Germany. We are here to discuss the crisis in Europe and the United States following the corona pandemic. Thank you for joining us, Manuel, and good to be with you.
Thank you so much for being in your show.
You're welcome. For the first step, I'd like to have your rich words about general social status of the European countries in the critical situation and status. And if you want to compare these conditions with the United States, what would be the most significant difference and similarity?
There's one significant similarity I think we have in almost all Western countries, including the United States and almost all European countries. That is that when the disease arrived, when it started in January, February, almost no government was taking this threat serious. So if we look back to the months January, February, what is not so long ago, we see that the governments were downplaying the danger. They were saying, this is a Chinese thing. We are not hit by it. It's not our business. We had even statements that we don't speak about the real disease. We speak about a kind of, well, maybe a little bit a harder flu, but also that is not to be taken serious. And then all of a sudden, when the disease started spreading and when we had the first victims, the first dead people, the government started reacting in a very hectic and very badly organized way. We have one similarity as well, that was that in the beginning of the disease in January, especially, all Western mainstream media and Western mainstream politics were either making fun about China, or they were attacking China. They were accusing China to be an evil dictatorship. Because of the lockdown they did on the city of Wuhan. We remember the city of Wuhan, where all the disease started. The Chinese government was taking very quick and very strict measures and actions on Wuhan. So they quarantined a whole million city. But today Wuhan is reopened. The shopping malls are open again in Wuhan. And I think that the single Wuhan citizen has today more personal freedom than the average European citizen, or also, depending on the federal state, the average American citizen, where we are quarantined. We shouldn't forget that those journalists who were doing these campaigns, who were accusing China or making fun of China because of the Wuhan lockdown, they are sitting now already for many weeks in their home offices. They cannot go out, maybe for supermarket and pharmacy, but they are now in the same situation. And I think they stopped laughing about the other countries, which started very quickly and taking very strict measures. So that is a similarity. If I look today on the United States, I see that there is the presence of a strong movement considering the corona measures of the different federal member states as a type of limitation of personal freedom or of liberties. What might be in particular true, of course, social distancing and also wearing the mouth and or the face protection as a type of order from the government is seen by these people as a restriction. We have the same movements in Europe as well, but it seems to me, at least by media, that these countermeasures or these counter movements are stronger in US, since they for some reason confuse protection with limitation of personal liberty. Me, for my side, I don't feel so much limited by not by keeping social distance of 1.50 meters and wearing outside or in the supermarket a mouth protection.
Thank you very much. The lack of solidarity with Italy and Spain in the early days of corona crisis has caused much turmoil in Europe. Do you see this problem caused by the corona crisis as a lack of coordination among EU members?
That was really one of the most embarrassing examples of so-called European solidarity, what we witnessed with Italy and also with Spain. At the same time, we saw solidarity in Italy, especially in Italy. We saw solidarity coming from the Russian Federation, from China, from Cuba, and from Venezuela. That is a remarkable collection of countries, because all these countries are considered in Western mainstream media as a type of axis of evil dictatorships, of authoritarian states we should under all circumstances fight against on all levels. So these countries are showing solidarity, and it shows as well that the European Union as an entity doesn't work, it doesn't function. It is, as we call it in Germany, ein Schönwetterverein. That means it's a nice weather club. It's a club which more or less works if everything is fine and if things are somehow going smooth. But in times of crisis, we realize that countries are standing on their own. They have to care about their own. Solidarity is coming from other nation states. So solidarity works from one to one, and by bilateral agreements it works, but we see the failure of multilateral constructions such as the European Union. I think that is a very important lecture, and I think the failure of the European Union will also change the face of Europe after the crisis, when we will have to work on
following the fall in
getting started
crude
again. Yes.
oil prices, the European stock market indices fell sharply. Has Europe met an economic crisis like the US or not?
In my opinion, the whole world is facing a crisis, a century crisis right now. I mean, that is what all the analysts say. This is what all the observers say. It is not limited to Europe. It is not limited to the West. I think it's a thing the whole world has to work on. And the most important thing to face this crisis is a proper analysis, how the crisis could appear. And I think one of the most important lectures should be that the world after Corona, especially in the economical order, cannot be the world before the Corona crisis, because the Western system, the system of the globalist system of free markets, of a so-called open society, was showing itself also on the one side as an afterburner for the virus. So the virus simply was able also to use all these networks to getting spread. And on the other side, it showed itself as not capable to face the threat of the virus. So the so-called open society and the so-called open market literally until today did nothing to contain the virus. All measures we were seeing were measures of which are totally against all these so-called Western principles of open society. So I think that is an important lecture. And we will hopefully witness a world after Corona crisis when we have to get our economies restarted, when we have to see, for example, how the millions of unemployed people, the million of small and medium businesses, especially in Europe, who couldn't now work for 2 months or for even longer, who lost their businesses or who ended up in debts, how this backbone of our society, because we are not speaking now about the huge multinational financial structure companies, we speak about the small and medium businesses, how these people who build the backbone of our societies, wherever they are, if they are in Iran, if they are in Europe, or also in US, how these people again get on their feet.
Okay, let's jump to Donald
Trump's
behavior these days, and
maybe for the next 10 to 20 years after this crisis.
Donald Trump did not even try for a moment to create a kind of global harmony in the face of crisis caused by the corona pandemic. On the contrary, he actually went so far as to justify his unilateralism. He even closed the borders of the United States to the Europeans without any prior warning. How do you assess this manner on behalf of the US president?
So if I would be a cynical person, what I am for sure not, I would say Donald Trump is giving this whole crisis at least some ironical points by his behavior and by his statements. So, so he is giving all the crisis some entertainment, but we shouldn't say that because that kind of entertainment can be very dangerous. We had just some days ago the statement of Donald Trump when he suggested injections with disinfection fluids or so. So these things are highly risky and they are highly dangerous. When it comes to his measures he is now doing, I think his big luck when it comes to the corona crisis is simply that the United States of America are a federal country, a federalist country, where the federal states have, well, not independence, but they have some sovereignty. So by more or less good governors who handle the crisis, the United States are not so hard hit maybe today as they would be if everything would depend on the decision of someone like Donald Trump. But yes, you're right. Donald Trump is not just in the eyes of his traditional opponents like in Iran or in Russia or in China seen now as a total chaos within this crisis, but also within the Western sphere and within the Western countries. We have the saying that you recognize a good leader not when everything is going well
sure.
and going fine, but that you
It
recognize
is
a good
said
leader in
that the
times of
corona
crisis.
pandemic
This is
has
definitely a
exposed Europe and the
situation we
United
have
States'
right now, and
unwillingness to
definitely Donald
face
Trump
such
is
a
showing
crisis,
himself not
and
as
the
a good
West's
leader.
inability to cope with the crisis is rooted in perception or management style that is unique to large neoliberal businesses. Do you agree with this point of view?
Absolutely. The coronavirus proves or is like a proof that the structure of a Western society more or less might work if all kinds of controversies, if all kinds of crises are far away, if you keep them far away. But the coronavirus proves Western societies as not capable to face such threats. When we see the measures you have to take against the coronavirus, all these measures are clearly against the DNA of Western liberalism, the social distancing, the orders, also that you have to protect communities, what is not even known in the principles of Western society, that I would say also that you stuck together in the community, also, for example, the family values that you cannot like in the LGBT communities, you have multiple social contacts and all. So all these things are questioned by the coronavirus. And that is what I mean. I think the lecture of this crisis will be maybe for some Western societies that the way before the corona crisis cannot be the way after. Other societies, again, they will not learn this lecture. They will still simply going on. But as we see in Europe right now, we have two different types of dealing with the crisis. We have the type of dealing with the crisis by more or less copy-pasting the strict measures we observed in China, and we observed in Russia, we observed also in Iran and in other countries. And on the other side, we have societies which try to avoid this. Clearly, those countries who have the strict measures, who try to contain the virus, are right
Yeah.
now the ones
Given
who
the
really
problems
flatten the
that
curve,
have
simply.
arisen
So
and
the
the
virus
effect
is
of
like the
Corona on
scientific
the
proof
power of
that
Western
Western
influence, what do
ideology
you think
doesn't work in a
will
crisis.
be the international interaction in the post-Corona era, especially between Europe and the United States?
Oh, that will be very interesting. So first of all, we have to take into account the emotional factor. We have horribly disappointed countries in Europe from the United States, including Italy. Italy is a country with a huge presence of US American troops, such as Germany, since World War II. The Americans literally did nothing to help the Italians when the coffins were like skyscrapers in northern Italy. The Americans were doing nothing while the Russians arrived with their convoys with medical help. That will be a thing the Italians don't forget for generations. So this disappointment in the United States, also the disappointment, especially in the incapability of deal with the virus and the economic crisis coming with the virus inside United States, these are things you cannot simply replace or remove after the crisis anymore. That will be in the memories of Europe for long. So Europe might be, after the corona crisis, a little bit more independent from the United States. Europe might be a little bit more questioning the US-American dominance also in Europe. Europe might maybe or hopefully a little bit more understand the political stance of countries such as Iran, Venezuela, Russia, China, who are very critical towards the United States. Europe, the consequence might be that we have a little bit a more independent Europe, what is, by the way, good for everyone, because a more independent Europe will decide on behalf of European interests. And to give you an example, you are from Iran. It is in European interest to have a good relation and to have good also business relations with the Islamic Republic of Iran. These are two lobbies which are both not European. It is on the one side the Israeli lobby and on the other side the US-American lobby trying to prevent us in going into good relations with Iran. That is absolutely not European. So by distancing ourselves and by becoming more independent, more sovereign, that might have positive consequences, not just for Europe. It might have also positive consequences for all those countries.
Okay, good. And I hope
together with us have a mutual benefit of good relations.
Also,
I try to be very optimistic in these dark times.
I hope that we will see the good things on behalf of whole of the world. Actually, I'd like to have a question about your own country, about Germany. How is the situation in your country? Are you satisfied with your government in managing the crisis?
No, I'm not satisfied with my government managing the crisis because if the government would have taken the crisis serious in the beginning, we wouldn't now have all this negative developments we have right now. That must be very clear. Nevertheless, it is of absolute importance to keep the rules of quarantine. It is absolutely necessary to keep the rules. So, in my opinion, the government was far too late, although it could have known. Why was it too late? Because it didn't want to disturb the carnival celebrations, because football championships were more important than the protection of the population. The problem generally in Western governments is that they somehow try to appease the population by not doing too hard stuff, but when it's necessary to protect, you shouldn't watch if there is something like a popular festival. If we just look how big the debate was now about banning, about postponing, or about simply canceling the Oktoberfest in Munich, the biggest beer fest in the world, where a government simply should say we have to protect the population and we will not do this year. There we have huge debates. So in times of crisis, a government has to be courageous and brave enough to take decisions, even if in the beginning maybe a lot of people in the population might not understand or might not be in favor of that kind of decision. So that is a failure. We see right now that the government, but okay, this is in Germany also a fact that we are a federal country, so we see different regulations in almost every federal country of Germany. Germany is consisting of 16 federal entities, so it is quite a difference if you live in Bavaria or if you live in Berlin or if you live in North Rhine-Westphalia. So, but these are things, they are rooted in the political system. There you cannot really blame the government for. But we learn also in Germany, that is representative for the Western societies, that we are not capable to face and to react on a crisis. And one should be almost thankful that we speak about the virus with almost a very low mortality. Yeah, that we are not speaking now about a virus with a far higher mortality, because the failures in the Western systems would cause a lot of more dead people than it does right now. We see in Germany, that is my last point, also when it comes to our health system. Germany used to be one of the countries in Europe, or in the West, or in the world, we have almost to say, with one of the best health systems, which guaranteed the citizens the best health care which could be provided. Within the last decades, there was a lot of austerity policy taking place on the health sector. Hospitals were closed. We have a problem that the salaries are far too low for doctors and nurses, while the work hours of these people were extended. So all these things of liberalism, these developments of liberalism, the austerity policy, the reducing of costs right now is the real crisis. The crisis is not the virus itself. The crisis is the waking up shock that we spared for some austerity policy and for a liberal capitalist system, the health sector down, the social health sector down, and now we wake up in a situation when we see that a hospital maybe doesn't have enough special care beds, that we don't have enough personnel in the health sector, that the health sector was spared down to a stadium that it handles the normal situation, but it's not capable to handle a crisis. So these are all things we learn right now. And hopefully we learn. Hopefully the crisis has the effect that all these wrong developments are identified and are corrected. Because if they are not corrected after the crisis, if the state simply says, "Oh, we were lucky and now we have the crisis behind us," then nothing is won. Then we just have a lot of dead people. We have a huge economic damage, but nothing changed. And when the next crisis comes, if it is a
Okay, thank you very much.
catastrophe
I
of
couldn't agree
nature,
with you
if it
more. Thank
is
you
a
very much for
virus
your
or
nice words.
whatever, we will be in the same situation. So the
At the
situation right
end,
now
I would
should be
like to,
used to
if you want
correct
to add
the wrong
something else,
developments and mistakes of the
or you
past.
want to add something more, I am all ears. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your noteworthy remarks, and
No,
God
thank you. I
bless you.
think we said everything. I think everything is said.
Goodbye, inshallah. Dear audience, thanks for watching another episode of the Fact series, which was a talk with Manuel Ochsenreiter, journalist and political analyst from Germany, that was about the crisis in Europe and the United States following the corona pandemic. Take care of yourself these days, and catch you later.